This,
Yeah, great. Let's get it going. So, Mike, I think I'll just pass it over to you to get
yeah,
things started.
thanks, Brian. So welcome everyone to the webinar today. This is a subject that's really exciting for Brian and myself, who both work at Lab 49. It's all about how we go about creating successful design systems at Lab 49 with the clients that we work with. And it's also about how we're now starting to move into design to code automation, which is a really exciting topic that I think many people are talking about in the industry right now. So, we've created quite a lot of design systems in our time, not just for Lab 49, but before we worked here. We've worked on many design systems through large scale digital transformation engagements. And I guess really what the point of this webinar is that we wanted to share some of the experiences that we've had working with these clients because hopefully that information might be useful in your own efforts with design systems. So today it's going to be Brian presenting and myself. And yeah, we're going to talk just for a minute or two around who we are as a company. And then we're going to get into, why we love design systems and some of the pitfalls that we've seen with design systems and how we go about creating successful design systems. And then we've got quite an interesting, exciting demo that Brian's going to present, which is all about headless design systems. So we've built a proof of concept, which we use to get our clients excited around headless design systems and to engage with us on building headless design systems. And we want to share that with you today. And then we have some time at the end just for questions and to wrapping up. So collectively, we've worked on a whole bunch of design systems. And my name is Mike. I'm working looking after the product design practice at Lab 49. And I've worked on around 24 design systems from beginning all the way through to end in my career since 2010. And I love design systems more than sleep. So that gives you a sense of like how much I'm into them. I'll let Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Hey, everybody. I'm Brian. So, I head up the interactive practice at Lab 49. We spend all of our time thinking about UI engineering. Mobile is also a component of this team. And yeah, I also love design systems. I've been doing this for a very long time, thinking through how they work, how they should be constructed, and with my kind of engineering perspective, how they should be implemented. I will point out that even though I do love design systems a whole lot, I don't actually have it tattooed on my back. Just for the record, yes, I have a lot of tattoos, but I haven't gone quite that far yet. Mike, back to you.
Thanks. So, who are we? Lab 49. I don't know if anyone's heard of us, but we've been around for about 20 years and we just work in finance. So, a lot of our clients are kind of large projects, multi-phase over a number of years. And so, with those types of systems, they really do require, extra thinking when it comes to managing the design assets and design systems that they use, right? Because they can have multiple products, all wanting to have a similar feel, utilizing efficiencies that design systems brings. And yeah, we're not incumbent to any particular technology. We always do what's the latest tech. We always think about what the problem is and come up with the right solution for that client. And we work with a whole bunch of well-known people in the industry from investment banks and other financial institutions. And so we do everything all the way from the beginning of the process all the way to delivery and beyond. So, whereas I sit more in the design and in the strategy side, and Brian sits more in the technology side, and I guess we both go into delivery. There's a whole bunch of other areas within Lab 49 that we cover so we can provide an end-to-end service. This is just an example of one of the trading systems that we've produced. So this is for cryptocurrency trading system. And this is an example of a fund fact sheet and a visualization to explore a portfolio someone might have. And we've also worked for central banks. This is a kind of an internal auction system to buy and sell assets that the central bank is selling or buying into the market. And this is a concept here for a wealth management firm, and it's really about visualizing how a person can see their goals in their in their horizons and the types of objectives that they have and their diversity, and being able to use an AI system to modify this graphic. And it's just a different way of kind of visualizing that kind of classic wealth planning. So yeah, that's a little bit about us. And yeah, we love design systems a lot. As I was saying, a lot of the projects we do require design systems. We don't often just use third-party design system on open source. We build bespoke design systems from scratch. So we've seen a lot of our clients fail using design systems, and then we come in and we help them to produce a design system that's going to work. And what are the reasons that we've seen our clients need design systems? And some of the things that we've seen tech teams just implementing the same UI components like over and over again, leading to inconsistent UIs. We've seen our own teams, like our own UX people, our own product designers, just spending hours and hours in QA when the engineers are delivering stuff and it's just not the same as what we've designed. And it just creates a lot of technical debt that often doesn't get fixed. And that's often because features get prioritized over design polishing, whereas a design polishing is really what we believe gives a product that real kind of special sauce, that professional look. And we've also seen there's a lot of clients developing products without a UX resource, and really jeopardizing the kind of UX best practice, compliance, and accessibility standards that having a design system brings. And one of the other reasons that we've seen our clients, reach out to us for design system is because when you don't have one, it really starts to force the developers to think about UX, and it pulls them away from what they're best at. But you do get some engineers that do enjoy UX, but it's quite rare to find someone who's just as proficient in one as they are in the other. And design systems really help people to be the best at what they enjoy. And it also allows, for low cost guidance, right? From building products, you don't always need to have a full-time product designer if you have a design system. And so, we've seen organizations reach out for design systems because they want to be able to accelerate and get things off the ground. And we've also seen, you get a lot of conflict actually in Scrum teams when you're doing the daily stand-up, discussing what's the best pattern to use. We've seen problems where there'll be kind of heated debates about which is the right way to go, and I think a lot of time can get wasted there. So we've seen design systems be able to put a stop to those because there's patterns and standards in place. And then the benefits that we've seen through having a design system, there's so many of them. I think one of the big ones right now, which we're going to talk about later, is just that connection between Figma, a design tool, and the multiple front-end code libraries that a firm could have on different products, and just be able to sync between Figma and the front-end code libraries, potentially without an engineer being involved, although I don't think we would advocate for that, but it's possible. So big benefit obviously is just that accelerated product design and front-end development. So just reducing the time to market. The design systems create components that can be used firm-wide so that nothing has to be developed again and again. It really reduces frustration, I think, when people have something to guide them, especially for engineers. And it really enables be able to adapt and change to requirements, because I think when you're developing and products, the product is never really done, right? It's always being iterated on. And so having a design system just allows to adapt faster to those changing requirements. Whole bunch of things here. I won't go through them all, but I hope these resonate with you in terms of some of the benefits. And design systems all sound great, but to be completely honest with you, a lot of them fail. And we've experienced failure with our clients who have tried to get a design system adopted. And I think adopted is the key word there. Trying to get a firm to adopt a design system is the challenge. And one the key things that we see is just about maintenance, and this small study here, this small survey shows a correlation between successful design systems and ones that do have a process around maintenance. And I think that's just one of the reasons why design systems might fail. Maintenance is important, but there's a whole bunch. And I don't know if anyone on the webinar today has been developing design systems. I'm sure you have. And I reckon some of these will probably resonate with you about some of the challenges with design systems and reasons where they might fail. One of them is that it's just underestimated. So we see a lot that the effort to actually create a design system is underestimated, and it kind of results in this half-baked solution. People really don't realize that it's not just an initial investment, it's an ongoing investment continuously. It's a living, breathing product that needs to be treated like a product, like other products within the firm. We've also seen that actually there could be a lot of investment, but then people just don't want to use it, right? So it just doesn't get adopted. And that might be because it's just too hard to use. Maybe the rules are difficult to learn and implement. It could be that there's no support. So there's no team you can reach out to ask how you can use a design system. There's no documentation around how you go about it, how you contribute to it, how you consume it. It could be that it just inhibits creativity. And so, a design system is great for accelerating, but at the same time, it can't be built in such a way that it prevents designers from being creative and coming up with new. And it could be that the design system is just chaotic, and that could be one of the reasons why people don't want to use it. Maybe it becomes forked too many times, which really diminishes the whole point of having a design system. And every time you fork it, the benefit of having a unified system is diminished. And then when we think about funding for a design system, lack of buy-in from senior management is often a reason for failure. So it can be often started as kind of like a grassroots movement where a bunch of people, maybe they're designers, maybe they're coders, who really see the benefits of it. But if they lack to get that buy-in from senior management, then it's unlikely to be properly realized and actually become something that gets adopted. And that kind of links to just lack of product ownership. So just the failure to think of this as a standalone product that needs funding, it needs staffing, really might prevent it from having the direction and the push that it needs. And a final one that we've seen a lot with senior management is, even if you can get them excited about it, it's trying to get that return on investment. And often when it comes to finding a buyer for design systems, it's often someone from the tech senior management, and they're often wanting to build things that have a direct relationship to revenue generating parts of the business. A design system which is an accelerator for delivering products is a harder one to sell. And so if it's not done in the right way, and often return on investment is a key metric that they're looking at, it might fail to get that executive funding and support. So hopefully some of those are familiar to you, and hopefully a few new ones as well. And really how to do it the right way, right? So we've put this together as our design system maturity journey. And we have these kind of two parts of it, the virtuous design system journey, which is what we believe to be the right way to build design systems. And then we have the bottom part in the red, which is the vicious design system journey. So it all starts off about planting the seeds. And I think, that grassroots movement is a good starting point. But I think the first point of divergence is when those people who are in the grassroots start building stuff, start building components, just get straight into it. Whereas that is a sure way to go down this vicious route. We've seen most success where these people start to build a business case. So they start to think about it from a point of view, okay, why are we building this? What's the model? What's the cost? What's the return on investments? How are we going to govern it? What are the staffing needs and what are the risks? And this small group kind of works together to put together a business case. And then it moves into getting sort of buy-in by the next level of management, and then thinking about the operating model. So, how would we get adoption? How would we think about what we need to do and when? And so this is really when we start thinking about this as a product. Who are the people that we need to speak to? Let's interview all the engineers. Let's interview the designers. Let's start building a case, which is more than R&I, but it's more around, who are the teams, who are the people, and start to agree on what an MVP looks like for this product and along that roadmap. And from there, we see a pilot program. So on the vicious design system journey, when there isn't a pilot program, it's very quickly gets quite chaotic because everyone gets excited about this idea of a design system and everybody wants it. And of course, the people who came up with the idea are really excited because they want to get everyone involved because, they're excited about it. But it can just grow too quickly and then become quite chaotic because it then becomes hard to manage. And it's much easier to refine the approach, the documentation and the policies when it's just a small group of people with a very small number of teams feeding from it. And so that's why we advocate for a pilot program where you would then just build out the documentation, all the parts of the design system that was included for the MVP in the roadmap, and then get one or two teams, probably brand new teams, building brand new products because that's easier, and then work with them to refine the design system until you actually go to an MVP release in kind of a planned way. That's how we see design systems kind of being most successful. I'm sure there are other ways as well, but based on the experience that we've had, this is the route that we've had most success with. If these things don't happen, it just quickly becomes chaotic. Or, one of the other reasons on the previous slide can be how we go down to that vicious side of things. And in fact, the design system itself has quite a large anatomy. And I think by looking at this, you can see it's not just about what you might consider to be a design system, which is the UI components on the left, where we have, your Figma components. But actually, it's also the front-end coded components. And that could be in multiple languages. And you can see underneath on that first column there, all the different types of things that you kind of expect to see in a design system. But the other things in the second, third, and fourth column are really important, but often overlooked. And so policies around contributing, consuming, how do we update and maintain? How do different teams pull updates? And how do they choose which parts of the updates they want and which parts they don't? What's the documentation? How do we test the design system? And then in the standards, what are the accessibility standards? And then in the advisory support, how do we help people? How do we build a roadmap of what we're going to how we're going to extend the design system over time? And how do we triage requests for those design system changes? How can we help people with sample applications or starter kits or even some sort of training? So all of these parts for us are very important. And Lab 49, we have an accelerator which covers the parts that are marked in blue, so we can get off to a good start with building design systems. One of the important things I think is the return on investment. And we run a test where we can take a piece of functionality and we get 5 engineers to code it, both one team of engineers with a design system and one without. And then we're able to measure that return on investment. And one of the things we're working on at the moment at Lab 49 is a calculator where we can go to our clients and say, hey, look, we put all the variables into it and we can try to work out for you what a return on investment would be based on the number of people, the types of products you're doing, how long it takes you to develop a product. And this is a key tool in trying to educate our clients around the value of design systems, which is, it's quite a hard thing to do, to try to do that. And our return on investment calculator helps with that. So design systems and headless design systems, exciting topic. And we've been building headless design systems, and we have the demo to show you today. But for anyone who doesn't know, a design system, like a regular type of design system, different, you can see on this diagram here, you have designers at the top on the left, and then designers are doing designs in Figma and creating components. And then there could be multiple development teams, perhaps all working for different products in your organization. Each of those product teams are going to look at your Figma file and they're going to interpret it. Now, they can see the size, the shape, the font, but in my experience, even engineers looking at Figma where they can see all the details of, let's say, a button, it will be interpreted slightly different. Maybe the spacing will be slightly different, or the padding will be, and it's very hard to get consistency. And each of those teams will then push to their code, and there will end up being kind of inconsistencies across the product suite. Now, the version on the right here, we can see is a headless design system, and it introduces headless design system software. We use a piece of software called Token Studio, which is a plugin to Figma. But basically, Figma breaks down all of its style attributes into tokens, which are read by the HDS software. And then all of the different code libraries also feed from their style attributes from the same software. So it's kind of this the tool that sits in the middle and can be pushed to and pulled from, and provides all of the style attributes. And that really means that anything can be pushed from Figma into the different code repositories for multiple projects, all in different languages. And it actually works the other way as well, where changes in the code repository can be pulled back into Figma from these repositories. So it's kind of this amazing or kind of automated process that we're very excited about. And it really just means, one of the big things for me is that just means that we can create that consistency across product suites. And also when we make changes, which happens often, we're able to keep it consistent. And then of course just all of the great things about design systems, including of course accelerated time to market, is a major impact as we can start to build out across different products quickly. So yeah, headless design systems, very exciting. And this is the point now where I'm going to hand over to Brian. He's going to give the demo of our headless design system.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to pull up my screen share. Just a moment here. And what I'll do is step through exactly as Mike described. We're going to showcase a workflow here where you can see that automation happening. Changes will happen inside of Figma, and then we'll automatically move those changes into an application. One of the things that I want to point out before we jump in is that for this demo, what we're going to showcase is a React application, and we're generating a Tailwind configuration file. For the technical folks on the call, you'll understand kind of how you can use these tools to solve all different kinds of problems. What I want to point out is that you can use this exact technique to generate any type of code that you need for the product that you're trying to build. So for example, if you wanted to generate CSS custom properties, you can do that. You can also go all the way to generating Swift code or Kotlin code if you wanted to support a mobile application. So from here, let's dive right in. On the screen now, I'm showing our internal private GitHub repository for our headless design system project. It is a private repository, but if anyone would like to get a closer look at what's going on, please feel to reach out. More than happy to give you a showcase of what's going on at a much more detailed level. One of the things that I'll point out right off the top is we are trying to be thoughtful about the documentation that we're creating. To Mike's earlier point, one of the pillars of an effective design system is the ability to understand what's going on inside of the design system, to find information about how to use it effectively and how it works. So we want to make sure that we're doing that here in this example. One of the things that I'll kind of draw your attention to right away is this list right here. And this is the list of automated checks that are happening when we're doing the changes in Figma and automatically bringing them across to our example application. The point that I really want to make here is that these largely are the types of CI/CD processes that you would establish on any application that you would create anyway. So even though what we'll be showing is a workflow where designers are making changes in Figma and pushing those changes to our GitHub repository, all of the typical automated quality checks that you would want to have in place for a modern application are all happening. This folds in really nicely to your existing SDLC, whatever processes you have in place. You can continue to follow them, including code reviews. There's some more information here about third-party tools that we're using. I'm not going to go too deep into this right now, but again, if anyone is interested, I'm more than happy to do a more detailed walkthrough. So here is our GitHub repository. What I want to show first is our production environment for our example demo application. And that's right here. And this is something that is a kind of simplified kind of information sheet that you would see about this particular security, something that you might see like in a wealth management context. It's deployed here on Vercel. All of that is automated, so we'll consider this to be our production application. And you can see many elements on the page that you would expect to find in a finance-focused product. So we have some basic charts, we have some tables, lists, and things like that. One of the other things that we incorporated into this demo is some theme switching. So we have the ability to support multiple themes here inside of our design system. And what we've done is created a very basic kind of retail-oriented theme. It's bright, it's airy, it has rounded corners, and something that you might expect in more of an institutional context. Dark mode, definitely, sharp corners, slightly different type treatments. So we're able to support these multiple themes. From here, why don't we go ahead and jump into our design file. And inside of our design file, what we've done is created a design for the applications themselves, which actually I can just reset the colors here back to our production styles. I'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment. But we have our designs for the application itself, which you just saw in our production environment, but we also have elements that you would expect to find in a sophisticated design system. This is a demo, and this is a subset of what you would expect in a design system that you would use in production. But a lot of the typical things that would be defined as tokens are here. So we have a color palette, we have type styles, we even have icons and avatars here as assets that we can use inside of our application design. And you're seeing elements of these show up inside both of these designs. Now, from here, now that we've looked at our Figma file, our design system, and our application design, I want to spend a few minutes going through what that workflow might actually look like in practice. So what we'll want to do is make a few changes to this design. One of the things that I'll point out here is that we are using a plugin called Token Studio. And Token Studio is a great way to manage all of the tokens that you're using in your application in a visual way and create that linkage with the elements inside of your Figma file. Now, what I'll do just briefly is jump back to our GitHub code base here. And what I wanted to do is showcase where the tokens live, what they look like. And it's this JSON file, which I think most people on the webinar will be familiar with. And we have a list of all of the elements that are in our design system defined as tokens. You'll see this come through in a few other places during this demo, but it's good to show you here that our tokens are defined in this GitHub repository. This is our source of truth for all of our token values. Inside of this file, you'll find corresponding tokens for the various elements of the design system that I had just shown inside of Figma. So for example, you can see color palettes. So this is the gray color palette. We have other colors further down in here. We have a green color called emerald, for example, and many other aspects in here. It's quite a long file. There's quite a lot of elements to this, but the management of these elements Token Studio helps do that in a visual way. I'll also point out that we have what we call semantic tokens, so things that point to specific parts of the application. So for example, the color of the header in the retail theme might be considered a semantic token, and the value of that token is yet another token, which we might call like a primitive value, for example. So we're able to manage both of these things in concert with each other. Having shown you the tokens.json file, if we jump back into Figma and we start thinking about what our design workflow might look like, what I wanted to show here is that we're consuming these tokens inside of Figma using the Token Studio plugin, and you can see that exact same file exists right here. In this view, we have the visual management of these elements. So I just wanted to make clear that the connection is there. We're able to bring across the elements of this design, the tokens, and this is the mechanism by which we're going to enable all of the underlying automation, but also that communication and that collaboration between designers and engineers. Okay, so why don't we jump in and start making some changes to our design workflow. What we'll consider changing is a few different elements of this. Why don't we start with this header color for our retail theme? Now, that token is right here. This maps directly to that JSON file that I was showing earlier. And what we'll want to do is go ahead and edit the value of this token. Right now, it's pointed at this primary color palette, but I think we can go ahead and make a change. Let's use this amber color here, and we can save that change. And we can see by making changes to the values of the tokens themselves, Figma is updating here in the design. So this will give you a sense of how you might apply these different tokens to other things. Why don't we go ahead and do a few more changes just so you can get a sense of the flexibility that's in here. So if we take a look at our institutional oriented theme, that has a different token, that has a different value. So this particular one was pointing at the purple color palette. So why don't we go ahead and also change this particular color. I usually tend to go for kind of this rose color palette. So we can make that change. And we're not limited to just colors. We can change other elements of this design as well. So one of the things that I'll go ahead and jump in and change is this type style. The type is mapped to yet another token. And so we can go ahead and change the value of this particular token. Right now, it's using this sans serif typeface called IBM Plex Sans. Why don't we go ahead and change that to a serif typeface? So we can do that right here. And then finally, one more change that I would like to make is you'll notice in our institutional theme, the table that's displayed on the page, it has the same information density as our retail theme, which typically in an institutional theme, we might look to have something that has a bit more density. Things are closer together. We want to optimize for showing as much information on the screen as possible, usually for people like professional traders at a desk at a bank. So why don't we go ahead and edit the value of this particular token, and we'll change this to something that's considerably more dense, which is yet another token. And if we apply that, again, we can see Figma understands how to apply that value to this particular element in the design. At this point, we can stop making changes to our design. What I want to do now is step through the automation process. So from here, what we can do is review our changes. We can get ready to push these changes into GitHub and automatically open a pull request. Inside of this tool, we can see here a view of exactly what had changed, including the raw tokens.json file that we had shown earlier. We can validate that the changes that we made were what we wanted to make. And now I can enter in a commit message that we'll use inside of our pull request. So what I'll say is update colors, update type, for example, and I'll go ahead and make a new branch. We'll call this webinar demo. Now I'm going to push my changes to GitHub, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new pull request. Now, when I create that here in GitHub, as I was mentioning earlier, this portion of the workflow follows exactly the existing development processes that you would want to have in place already. And immediately on the screen, you can see a multitude of automated processes kicking off. And there's a few things happening here. I'll talk through what's going on because this does take a minute or so to complete. So first and foremost, one of the things that popped up inside of this pull request in our GitHub is this comment from Vercel. And what we're doing here is automatically deploying our changes to a deployed environment. We're using Vercel to create what we call a preview environment, where we can just see the changes that we made. This is a great way to collaborate with other folks on your team, certainly other engineers, but product owners and designers and stakeholders as well, so that they can see the changes that you're proposing to make well before you get to production. It's a great way to review changes. At the same time, in the background, we're deploying an application called Storybook. And if you're not familiar, Storybook is a UI development environment so that you can build UI components in isolation. It's a fantastic tool, and it's something that Lab 49 uses quite a lot of, very popular with UI engineers generally, and has become a core part of our UI engineering workflow. We're going to deploy that as well. And as soon as it's ready, we'll walk through the components that are in there, and you can see how we're managing some of the change. Also happening in the background are a few other automated processes, one of which is our main CI process. I'm not going to go into great detail on this one because it's very technical, but we're running a lot of code quality tools in the background. So for the engineers who might be on the call, we're running tools like Prettier and ESLint. We're compiling TypeScript. We're running a number of different types of tests, also integrated with Storybook. We're also using some third-party tools to manage a few different aspects of this. Code Climate is a tool that we really like to use that will automatically monitor your code quality. I can showcase that in a little bit just so you can get a sense of what that looks like. And then finally, eventually, we'll see here in our CI checks, we're using a visual regression tool called Chromatic. I'll also show that in just a few moments. This is used to visually display the changes that are happening in your UI components so that you can more easily review those changes and ensure that those changes were intentional and catch any unintentional changes that might be happening elsewhere in your collection of UI components. Again, this is a great tool to collaborate with designers or product owners or other contributors to your project. As this is running, let me go ahead and refresh the page. Definitely taking a little bit longer than it typically does. However, I do have another pull request that I can pull up that has these environments already deployed, specifically in the case where it did take a little bit longer than we had expected. What I'll do is pull up the preview environment for a previous demo that we had done. And you'll notice here that the color for the header for the retail theme has changed. You'll also notice that the typography, the header color, and the table density for the institutional theme has changed. Now, the values here are slightly different. The colors are slightly different because this is an older pull request. But you can see here in the URL, this is not our production environment. This is our preview environment. This is the link that you could send to other contributors on your team to actually review what the changes that you're proposing to make are and ensure that they're correct. You can get that feedback from other contributors. I also want to showcase our Storybook deploy. Again, for those that are not familiar, this is a tool that you can use as your UI development environment. So here on the left, we have a list of all of the components that are in our application. These happen to be React components. And then in the middle, we have our sandbox area where you can actually see what these components look like and interact with them in a pretty detailed way. One of the components that I'll go ahead and pull up is our app header component. You can see that in isolation here in the preview area, and it has the change that we had made in the preview environment of our application that I had just shown you. What we can also do inside of Storybook is support theming. So we saw the theme switcher in our application. We can have the same theme switcher inside of Storybook. Yet again, this gives you the ability to test your UI components as you're building them in a fair amount of detail, and it allows you to share the progress with other contributors of your project. There's a few other elements of Storybook that I'll point out here because I do want to make sure that we're spending a bit of time talking about how normal engineering processes work really well with this design to code automation. And one of the components that I'll just use here as an example is this profile dropdown component. You can see it's an avatar. When I click on it, we get a menu with some options that we can select. If I click away into empty space, the menu goes away. One of the things that is really important and something that Lab 49 spends tons of time thinking about is automated QA. And one of the ways that we can do that is directly here inside of Storybook. What we're seeing here is a list of assertions, tests that we're running to make sure that this component is actually functioning the way that we expect it to function. So even though I can interact with it here manually myself by clicking, we can also automatically interact with the component by running these tests. Now, inside of Storybook, what I'm doing is stepping backwards in time through the various tests that run. And you can see as I do this, the component is changing and updating as if a user was really interacting with it. So you can have a fairly sophisticated set of tests that are a step above unit tests right here inside of Storybook. This is part of the reason why we use this tool so often when we're doing this type of work. One last point that I wanted to highlight inside of Storybook was the ability to run accessibility testing. This is highly, highly relevant if you're building anything that is public facing or external facing. Certainly it's important for internal facing tools, but when you're talking about financial industry regulations, these aspects of your application need to be monitored on a continuous basis. Yet again, we can do that right here in the Storybook. For this particular component, you can see there are no violations. There are only passes. We can expand some of the details of some of these checks that are running automatically. What I really want to make sure comes through is that we're doing this in CI. This is all happening automatically on every single change that a designer or an engineer is making to the design system. And that's what we're seeing ultimately in our GitHub pull request. All of these automated checks will eventually pass, provided there's no failures, no test failures, or anything else that we don't want to come through to our production environment. Finally, what I'll do is actually perfect. I'll go back to our pull request that we opened. And you can see here that this particular pull request also passed all of its various checks. Just very quickly, I'll pull open the preview environment for the changes that we made in Figma, just so you can see it. Here we have that kind of orange color for our retail theme and our blue color for our institutional theme. This was the pull request that we made on this webinar inside of Figma. The last thing that I wanted to show was another tool that we're using called Chromatic to handle the visual regression testing. Yet again, this is a great way for engineers and designers to collaborate together. I've pulled up a page here that showcases the change that we actually made. So Chromatic was able to tell us that, hey, for this app header component, we can see visually on the screen that there is a change. And of course, the particular change that we made was the background color. And there's different ways to use Chromatic to visualize what actually happened here. But this is yet another tool that you can use to make sure that the changes that are happening using this workflow are intended, that they are what you want, and this gives you another mechanism to review what those changes are. So finally, the last thing that I wanted to showcase very briefly was that you can do all of this workflow completely in reverse. So engineers are not left out of this process at all. What you can do is make changes to the tokens.json directly, and we can show you exactly what that looks like and how that might affect the design workflow. So what I've done here is in my terminal, I've pulled down the branch that I created inside of Figma. You may remember the name, the webinar demo. And I'm going to go ahead and pull open our tokens.json file in my text editor, which is VS Code. And you'll see here that the header token value, previously it was primary, and now it's amber. What I'll do is I'll make the change directly right here. I know that there is a color palette called emerald, so I'm going to change our header value to emerald. I'm going to go ahead and commit that change. looks like that command broke. I think my local development environment is not set up quite right, unfortunately. However, if I were able to make that change, what would happen is that this would get pushed back up to GitHub, and we would run through all of the changes, the automatic checks that I had just showcased. And this is what your typical engineering process would look like. What I would show if this development environment was working is that you can make that change to the tokens.json file, and it's that file that Figma is consuming and using to apply its changes to the design. So in that case, we would see the retail theme header changing to that emerald color inside of the Figma file itself. So that's your workflow in reverse. Engineers can contribute to changes to the tokens.json file, and we can see how those changes will then flow through to the designer workflow. At that point, that's our collaborative workflow in both directions happening automatically. I'll go ahead and pause the screen share here because we wanted to spend the last 10 minutes or so taking any questions that may have come up and answering those in real time. So I see that we did actually get a few questions already. So Mike, if you're ready, I'll just go ahead and read them out, and we can handle those. I'll just note if anyone else has questions along the way, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A or the chat. Either way is totally fine. So we have one question from Rushan Myers. It is, should you take an MVP approach to launching a new design system, given the possibility of brand extensions or new products introduced to the market? That's an interesting one. I think, Mike, we could definitely talk about how to kind of manage change because, yeah, your design system, your branding guidelines, and various other elements of your product ecosystem may change while you're doing that. Mike, any initial thoughts on how you might want to
Yeah, I
approach something like
mean,
that?
change is constant. So I think design systems aren't set in stone, constantly evolving. I think, yeah, because we consider a design system to be a product and a product evolves over time. So, yeah, I think if it's going to change, then it's probably even more of a reason to have a design system because you can update each of those brand elements, consistently across multiple places at once. If you didn't have a design system and your brand was extended or updated, then you'd have to go around to find all those places and update them one at a time. Whereas if your branding updates, you can update the effect it might have on a button and it will propagate throughout your entire system. So I think, yeah, most definitely. I think anything that is repeated more than once warrants to be in a design system because as soon as you do have something that's going to appear more than once, that's when you start to gain efficiencies through having a design system. Yeah, I have a question here. So, letting designers push design changes to code automatically, is that risky? And how could that be handled? Do you want to take that one, Brian?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So, I mean, it's a great question and actually something that comes up a lot. And hopefully through the demo, you got a chance to see how you can leverage all of those existing best practices to automatically monitor code quality and to run tests to assert that the changes that you're making are the correct changes, are expected changes. It's not that designers are working in isolation at all. In fact, we very specifically wanted to create a system where designers and engineers were working together so that engineering teams felt comfortable using a system like this. You could also augment kind of what I had shown with additional processes such as code review processes. It is code that is changing after all. So you can continue to utilize GitHub pull requests or Bitbucket or GitLab, whatever tool you might be using, continue to leverage your existing processes. And when changes that are driven from Figma design changes happen, you can utilize maybe an extra process just to make sure that design and engineering are reviewing those changes before they get merged. After that, all of the typical CI processes that you would want to have in place anyway should be happening, and they are happening in this demo. And I think that's how you can achieve a certain level of comfort with implementing a system like this.
Okay, great.
There's another one that came in through the Q&A.
Mhm.
This one came from Jacob Botterill, someone that we know well. How has Lab 49's thinking around headless design systems been influenced by feedback from client engagements?
Thanks for the question, Jacob. And I'd say I think the whole part around pilot programs has been influenced a lot by Lab 49 engagements because some of the buyers of design systems and firms that are interested in the next generation of design systems, the headless design systems, are somewhat skeptical about how it might work within their firm. And so that's where a lot of the thinking around pilot programs has come from clients being more resilient or resistant perhaps to the change. And the pilot program is a way to be able to explore the idea, the concept of the design system, how it might work within a firm, and without having to commit too much upfront, and choosing the right project to create it for, so that it's a considered thing and a measured thing, and measuring how successful it's been. So yeah, I think every project that we have where we build design systems, we're always trying to bring back that thinking into our approach to design systems.
There's one more detail that I would point out there as well. I think our focus on automatically measuring accessibility concerns during this process is definitely influenced by previous client engagements. There have been projects in the past where we've worked on applications that are public facing and therefore are subject to regulation of meeting certain accessibility requirements. And that work can sometimes be incredibly difficult to solve for, usually because of scale and just simply the amount of accessibility issues that you might uncover along the way. So using a system like this gives you the ability to manage accessibility concerns during the development process, where it's going to be much, frankly, cheaper to solve issues that you discover when you're creating UI components, but certainly much more efficient in an automated way, which helps engineers kind of uncover what's potentially going wrong in a way where you have a little bit more guidance, a little bit more clarity into how to fix some of those problems. Not
I
least of
think
all, you have output about like what's actually going on. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I think solving problems at the central point within a design system is much cheaper than solving them in each project where each development team is running their own accessibility testing, or they're doing their own modification on their components. If a lot of that could be handled centrally, then there's obvious efficiencies there.
Yeah, yeah,
So I have
absolutely.
a question here from Sally, and she's asking, how do I get people to use my design system where I work? Um, I would say if you already have an established or a design system that you want to become more established, a really good way to try to increase adoption is just to start capturing metrics around, the successes that you're having, and how it's helping people. Because within firms, there's often, people get FOMO from missing out. And if there's this kind of new thing going on, people might want in on it, but they have to be kind of aware that this thing is going on and get excited about it. And I think sharing the success with the firm is a great way to do that. Some of the activities that we've done in the past is to do kind of an internal roadshow or showcase to educate people on what it is and how it can help. Maybe some type of newsletter. Really let people see what it is that you've created, and then hopefully they'll reach out and come to you and want to be part of this product acceleration tool that you have. And I think just, yeah, trying to create a message which will resonate against the challenges that the product teams are facing would be a good way to go about it.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Mike. And from the engineering perspective, I mean, involving engineering teams in that process, that showcasing can be a great way to build some excitement and build some support. From the engineering perspective, we'd always love to use tools that are going to make our lives easier, make implementations faster and less error prone. That's an exciting topic. So yeah, gaining broad support, showcasing what you're doing, getting people excited It's easier said than done. That's definitely true. But I think that's one of the keys to being successful with a design system implementation like this.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. So this is from Philip. How do you manage releases of design system updates? And just reading in between the lines here, I guess that's around, multiple teams feeding from a design system. How do you manage those different teams that might be at different versions of the design system, or maybe they want to adopt parts of the design system, but not all of it? How does that get managed from a technology point of view?
Yeah, so this one has potentially many different components to it. And some of the techniques that I think you could really think about, rather than pure kind of technical solution, is some of that kind of documentation and providing a way for people to understand when things are changing and how. So one example that you could pull from the world of open source is really high quality release notes, for example. And you see this all the time inside of open source repositories on GitHub. Some open source projects even have very sophisticated documentation websites where they do some of this, and it gets very, very detailed. You can showcase exactly what's changing, why it changed, how it changed, and use that as a way to advertise to people who want to use the system that things are changing, and even could be a mechanism to get people excited about change and want to utilize the next release, which certainly is going to include some kind of improvement that people are going to want to use. So that's one aspect. From the more technical perspective, lots of different options with how you publish software, both internally and externally to your org. I think that's a fairly detailed conversation that might take some time to expand upon. But certainly having a place to publish the artifact so that other engineers in your organization can access it, that tends to be quite a challenge. Simply access is something to think about, and how people will pull your design system implementation, whatever it may be, React, Angular, Vue, or something else, into their application and use it. So that takes a little bit of thinking and potentially some experimentation.
Right. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Brian. So that's all we have time for today. Thanks everyone for joining the call today. It's been fun to speak to you for me, and sure for Brian too. And we hope that there's been some interesting takeaways for you in your own design system endeavors.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody in the audience.
All right. See ya.